Last week, President Obama, while visiting a small business in Lanham, Maryland, said, quote, "Today we received additional news suggesting that we are climbing out of the huge hole that we found ourselves in." The president spoke as the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics announced that the national unemployment rate fell from 10% to 9.7%. The president and his fellow Democrats, for some reason, thought this was a victory. This is no victory. This is a reflection of the inability of the president and most of the Democrats and many of the Republicans to recognize the true source of unemployment: regulations and taxes imposed by the government. Joining me now is Lew Rockwell, founder and chairman of the Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama. Lew, it's a pleasure. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Judge, it's great to be with you.
How do we count the ways in which the government, by its imposition of regulation and taxes, has caused unemployment? You actually did count those ways in a wonderful piece published at LewRockwell.com. So let's start with the first one, minimum wage. How does the imposition of the minimum wage enhance unemployment?
Well, we have to pay no attention to government or union propaganda and just look at what the minimum wage does. It outlaws employment. It says below a certain rate, it's illegal to work. Below a certain wage rate. Well, that means that people and the unions are always for raising the rate in order to put people out of work and to benefit their own union members. So this means that young people, poor people, people who Thomas Sowell always talks about the minimum wage cutting off the several rungs at the bottom of the ladder,
right,
so people can't get a step up.
So the government's behavior actually results in or presumes or accepts the premise that it is better to sit at home and do nothing, or it is better to sit at home and collect unemployment than it is to work at any number below the minimum wage, even if there is a willing employer and a willing employee at that rate.
And you'd say a young kid who'd like to get started in life and would like the benefits of working. You can, in fact, learn a lot more from having a job than being in a government school. But this is, of course, this is all made illegal. But if they could actually raise wage rates through the imposition of a minimum wage, why are they stopping here? You know, I'd like to make more. How about $1,000 an hour minimum wage?
Wow.
Then we'd all be rich. Of course, they would have 100% unemployment, except for maybe for Oprah Winfrey or whatever. The rest of us would be out of work.
Right. Payroll taxes. What does that do to unemployment?
Well, it's just a vast cost on the business to hire somebody. So it's not only they don't only have to pay you the minimum wage or typically a higher wage than that, but there are all kinds of taxes and all kinds of regulatory costs that are imposed, especially on small business, to make it very difficult to employ people. So this actually stimulates unemployment, the payroll taxes.
How about lawsuits that make it impossible to fire someone? I mean, it used to be that unless you had a written contract, you were an at-will employee, and you could be fired for any reason or no reason. Now there's that implicit threat. My lawyers will find some way that is against public policy for you to fire me, and therefore you have to keep me on even if I don't produce.
Well, it's the whole rotten concept of wrongful firing or wrongful discharge. You, as a free person, can leave the job if you don't want to be there, and the employer can get rid of you if he decides you're not doing the job, or maybe he doesn't like your attitude, or what. It's his business, his property. He should be able to, of course, abiding by any employment contract that may be signed. It's his right to get rid of you.
Talk about your property. I mean, you have to buy something called unemployment insurance. You have to buy workers' compensation insurance. And this forces you to admit strangers to your property, to inspect the property, to make sure it conforms with their standards. Let's talk about unemployment. What does that accomplish other than providing some kind of a safe haven for people when they lose their jobs not to look for new ones?
Well, just a basic rule of economics, if you want to have something more of it, you subsidize it. So the unemployment benefits, which keep increasing, subsidize unemployment. They promote non-work. So I can remember back in the first Bush administration when he was all worried about unemployment, as the president typically is, and so he vastly increased the unemployment benefits, both in length and in amount, and was shocked to find out the unemployment rate went up. Well, that's right. Although, you might have covered this in your forthcoming book on lies the government told you, but we can't really believe these unemployment rates either. In this last quarter, the unemployment rate went down, they tell us, to 9.7% from 10%, even though there were 20,000 more people unemployed. So in other words, they're just finagling with statistics. The real unemployment rate is probably more than 20%.
I think you're probably right, particularly with unemployment. You may not read the local New York papers, but we're going through a scandal here now where retired senior officials of the police department are claiming that their successors have lied about statistics, and they couldn't possibly be as good as the present people administering the police department claim. Another example of government trying to dupe us into a false sense of security by perpetrating lies, and the same thing is done with the unemployment figures. What is the big picture here? Why doesn't the government see the very basic principles of Economics 101? If you pay somebody not to work, they're not going to work. If you take away the freedom of negotiating between employer and employee and make illegal a certain range of salaries, that's going to result in no work for that person and ultimately more harm and more drag on the taxpayer dollars.
Judge, I don't want to shock anybody who's listening, but the government doesn't actually care about the people's welfare. What they care about is ripping us off. What they care about is controlling us, and they like humiliating us, too. That's why the nude radar scans and all that kind of stuff that they do. So they don't care about the people. Unemployment could be abolished overnight. We could have zero unemployment, which is what existed before the modern welfare state came into existence, by repealing all these laws. But various special interests and the government itself have an interest in having these laws in existence. They don't care that people's lives are ruined, that some young people never get a chance in life. Young black kids have a horrific unemployment rate. That it's just they don't care. They don't care about stepping on people. They like stepping on people. That's why they work for the government.
You know, the other day we had an economist on the air. I don't remember who, on another show. And I said, would the economy not do better if we didn't collect any income taxes from any individuals? Oh, yes, absolutely. In fact, unemployment would go down and there'd be a lot more money for businesses to invest. This is a person who believes in TARP and in the stimulus. And then I said, would it shock you to know, this is Ron Paul's statistic, and turned out he was correct, would it shock you to know that if the government had not collected income taxes in 2009, that would have been a lower number than the money it supposedly spent in TARP and in stimulus? Can't be. Yes, it was. So what did the government prove by this, other than adding to the debt of our children and grandchildren?
Well, the first thing the government has in mind is it must never shrink. It must only grow. So to give everybody a vacation from the income tax, which would have helped all of us in the real economy, wouldn't have helped the government. They, of course, want something like TARP, where they get to hand out billions and eventually trillions of dollars to their pals in big banking, Wall Street, and the military-industrial complex and so forth.
Do you know anybody who comes home at the end of the week after a tough week and kicks off their shoes and looks at their pay stub and says, you know what? I don't think I gave the government enough money this week.
There was a great business lady in Virginia in the 1940s who said, I'm not going to withhold. What I'm going to do is we're going to pay my employees their complete amount in cash, which is the way people got it in those days. And then they had to go to a various window, pay the federal income tax, pay the state income tax, pay the unemployment, and so forth. And, of course, they were all in revolt. They were all going crazy. And the IRS went in and they forced her to stop this, and the Supreme Court upheld it, that you could not ever give the worker the full salary, even though you immediately took it back. This was against, this was not in the interest of the government, and of course it wasn't in the interest of the government.
Heaven forbid that we should know the truth. Lew Rockwell, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Freedom Watch.
Oh, thanks, Judge.
You can catch today's show on foxnews.com/Freedom Watch and on Sirius 145, XM 168, or online at foxnewstalk.com at 6 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. From New York, defending freedom. Until the next time, stay free, America.